That's kind of small. Yikes.
Stand up all the night and call the fight. Let your men go out before the light. Here we come, the army of the night. Mother Maria, lined up side by side and bound to break. Set to die and fight the final day. Army of the night, we came to save Mother Maria.
That's quite big. Impressive.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Esports Money, ZSM, Mac 10, the Baldesian Buzzsaw, Urian Stormrage, whatever you want to call me. I need to start reusing handles in games, though I have been accumulating these over about 12 years. Hope you enjoyed the intro. We are recording this, the actual guide, on a different day from the intro because the intro is a fair amount of editing and I wanted to be really fresh when I went into this whole process. Now my face is about to enter light mode because that monitor is all white with the outline for this video. So the first thing we're going to talk about, we're just going to go over a little outline. First I'm going to talk about what went on in the intro. Second, I'm going to recap a little bit on the relevant bits from the last video, which I strongly recommend you watch. If you don't have what's in that last video, this might be challenging. We're going to talk a bit about food. We're going to talk about skill chains. We're going to talk about buffs and debuffs. We're going to talk about haste and marches, and then lastly, we're going to talk about Ashitacast / Gearswap. This stuff conceptually will cross over between Ashitacast and Gearswap. Gearswap is native to Windower. Ashitacast is obviously Ashita. I use Ashita and therefore am very familiar with Ashitacast. I am not quite so familiar with Windower. It's been quite a few years, more than a decade since I've used Windower. Windower is technically more powerful in what Gearswap can do, but that's not the most important takeaway from this video. And I have a feeling if you use Windower, you probably are sweaty enough that you have a fair understanding of Gearswap. But anyway, so let's start by talking about what happened in the intro. So you saw a disseverment that hit for 1,500 and change, and then you saw a disseverment that hit for 2,200 and change. Now, in terms of the enemy I was hitting it on, just to address this at the start, I don't know what the level of the first bird was, but the level of the second bird was 65. Those birds can spawn between 62 and 65. So at bare minimum, that wasn't a level advantage, and at worst, it could have actually been a larger delta because that first bird could have actually been lower level despite doing 700 less damage. That was a massive difference in damage. This video I've been calling the Ashitacast guide for a while now, but it's not really the Ashitacast guide. This is a guide on how to be good at the game, and Ashitacast is a core part of that, but obviously, after going over this outline with y'all, you understand that that's not... It is probably the focus or half of the video, but these other things you kind of have to understand in order for... you have to have a foundation in order to build a house, so to speak. So in that video, the difference between the first one and the second one, so I used Chain Affinity on both. Chain Affinity doubles the modifiers. So if you look at, like Disseverment, for example, has a modifier for Strength and for Dex. I believe it's 20% to 20%, and that doubles and becomes a 40%, 40%. So even though there's no skill chain it's closing, the spell itself does more damage baseline. But that was the same between both, as you can see. So what was different? Dia. Dia, first and foremost, we hit it with a Dia 2 with the Taru. Now, before you go, but I'm single boxing. We're gonna go on a tangent really briefly and say this guide is intended for those of you that are single or dual boxing. You do not need to dual box to be good. You do not need to dual box to... It is an advantage to you. Straight up, it is an advantage to dual box, but you do not need to dual box on Eden. There are some groups that might exclude you, but those groups are the kind of groups that are clearing Dynamis with 4 players or 8 characters. Outside of those niche cases, a skilled single boxer is still incredibly valuable, and you actually like dual boxing on the server because it means that if you have 1 or 2 really geared friends and really good friends, like myself, Liliana, I'm not going to drop any other names, but if you have 1 or 2 friends, you now have 2 or 4 friends that can just carry you through anything. I single boxed on this server almost exclusively up until 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I've been playing here since the end of 2022. So, anyway, now that we've got that out of the way, so we hit it with the Dia. The Dia dropped his defense by 10%. Now that's physical defense. That doesn't mean it's taking 10% more damage, but it is reducing the mob's defense by 10%. Second thing, Wild Oats. Wild Oats, assuming that connected, which based on the damage delta, I think it did. We know it did damage, but you can't actually detect if the debuff from that sticks because it's an additional effect. It's sort of like an additional effect of, I don't know, like blind or poison on a skill chain or on a weapon skill. You don't know until you see the fell off message. Wild Oats reduces the enemy mob's VIT by 15. When you are calculating physical damage from anything that uses strength, which I believe is everything, you typically have 2 to 3 places where strength comes in raw into the mathematical equation, and one of those 3 places is F strength, or the difference between your strength and the enemy's VIT. So by dropping that VIT by 15, for one of these strength calculations for damage, we have effectively made it so we have 15 more strength. The next thing, Chain Affinity, we use that in both. Food. So, Furion, why are you using food? These things are, at worst, level 65, which means you are accurate. I am accuracy capped on them. My accuracy is good, especially in, when I'm using Ashitacast and actually, swapping into the gear I have designed for that set. Why am I using the food? So, Soul Sushi, yes, it is, in my opinion, the best accuracy food in the game, but the reason that I used it for this demonstration is the 5 strength and 6 dex. So you're essentially double or in some ways triple dipping on the strength when you're using it to do your damage. It's more value. If you have a weapon skill or a blue magic spell that's like a 20% scalar on strength and a 20% on dex, that dex has got to be like 50% of a scalar for me to start going, okay, the dex might actually outweigh the strength here in terms of the way I want to gear for that spell. So either way, that's 6 dex and 5 strength. That's a lot more damage. And then the last one, of course, is loading Ashitacast. So if you look at my gear right now, we have, and I'm not wearing, again, this is on a different day, so I don't have the food buff up, but you can see I have 72 plus 23 and 63 plus 15 dex, strength and dex. So if I do AC set, I believe it's P8 Disab is what I named that set. Yep, AC disable, which will stop all my hot swapping. If you set one of your sets manually, the default is, I think, 5 seconds. So I just disabled it, and we can do a GL blink. You can see my disseverment gear, which makes me look very much like a clown with a helmet on. Now we're at 72 plus 64, and 63 plus 33. So plus 64 and 33. 64, 33. AC enable. Back to my auto gear. 64 and 33. 23 and 15. That is a massive difference. Now, we will come back to this. So, next we're going to get into the recap briefly on the previous video items that overlap here. So, Deeps / scoreboard / K-parser. Deeps is a Ashita exclusive, and Deeps is probably it's the worst of the 3, but it's my favorite of the 3, and the reason is my favorite of the 3 is because it is, if you're a new player, you're probably using the Ashita launcher. If you're just getting started in this game, you can type /load deeps, and you have this overlay. Now, if I had done damage on the Taru, you would see the Taru's name down here. It's a very simple parser. There's a lot of reasons people don't like it. First reason, it does not count pets at all. So if you are a pet job, if you are a Beastmaster, Puppet Master, or Summoner, Dragoon, I have that 175, I should remember it. You will not get your pet's damage factored into the equation. That's one thing people don't like. The second thing people don't like is, so if I close a skill chain with this, I will get an additional, so you see like this is the total damage my Wild Oats did in the few fights I had just to have something to show y'all. This is the damage from my cannonballs, my disseverment, my attack. I think there's 2 cannonballs and 1 disseverment. So if I had closed a skill chain, if I solo a skill chain and close it, it will show the skill chain damage. Whoever closes the skill chain is credited with the damage. Now, a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people think that this is cheating to pad your parse, and it kind of is. But the point of the parser isn't to wave your dick around, though that can be fun. The point of the parser is to go, is my damage good? First and foremost, the question is my damage good relative to the other people in this party? And if it's not, what can I do to fix it? And this is going to lead us, we're going to come back to this. Second add-on, recast. So again, I'm going to cast Cocoon here. I've got a fair amount of haste. Well, actually, no, I don't know if I have any haste I'm idling in. Maybe a tiny bit. But anyway, Cocoon, you can now see the cooldown on that spell. If I cast Utsusemi, yeah, I don't actually have haste in that. Oh, I just have this tiny bit of haste from the belt because I want SID. So now you can see the Utsusemi cooldown. Basically, if you load recast, you will see this. You can hold shift and move it around. And then let's see here. So if you look, we've swapped over to Lull Windurst to make sure that this is following. It is. So over here, you can see the party buffs add-on. So / add-on load party buffs. You can see where my mouse is down in the bottom right. Actually, let me just make sure. Yeah, you can see my mouse. You can see Protect, you can see Shell, and you can see 3 Utsusemi Shadows. This is a really, really important party buff, or important add-on, because it shows you what people have. This might not always be relevant to you, but you can filter out certain ones that are redundant, but you can also... like, the most important thing that it does is allows support jobs like Red Mage, Bard, Corsair to see who's got what buffs, who's missed a buff, did you make a mistake, did they make a mistake? Regardless, what can I correct here? Another thing it does is it shows you who's using food. So, I mean, if someone's using bad food, it's going to stick out to me when I see it in my chat log, but if someone doesn't use food, I might not notice. So you'll see the food there. Another really important one, and I don't know if this is... necessary. I think this is filtered by default, but you can tweak it so it won't be. You've got to, if you open up the config file for the add-on in your Eden /add-on /party buffs directory, you can customize, you can edit the filters. But let's say I'm in a party and I'm killing birds. This is a very common occurrence. This probably should be a common occurrence for you. If I am playing a melee, let's say I am playing Samurai, or yeah, we'll say Samurai, and there's another. So let's say there's myself and another Sam there. I am more likely to want to press the Voke button when that bird gets pulled if I am not in Berserk from my warrior subjob and I see that the other Sam is. In fact, occasionally, if I'm going to be partying for a long time, I will, if I'm, especially if I'm partying with, people that I'm in voice chat with, if there's another Sam /warrior there, I'll say something like, hey, do you want me to Berserk? Do you want us desync our Berserks so that it's a little bit more comfy there? Pecking Flurry while you have Berserk up hurts like hell. Warrior sub Nin, it's not as big of a concern because you do have Utsusemi, but unless you want to live at Segan, which kind of sucks, yeah, just an example from my experience, and the reason I bring that example up is even if you don't play support jobs, I don't really play support jobs. I have the Taru /White Mage, or the Taru Bard /White Mage alt that's just to buff my selfish, greedy main character. But even if you don't play support, there's a valid reason to want to have that add-on running. All right, now we're going to get into food. So, food. Broadly speaking, I mean, so you've got like ginger cookies, you've got a few things that will increase your healing, your HMP, so your MP recovered while healing. Typically, they are stuff like cookies that are like 5-minute durations. And those are all well and good, but I'm really going to be focusing on the attack and accuracy food. Those are the two types of food I'm most concerned with. I'm very biased because I play melees, but I think that this is really important. So, and honestly, like if I'm playing a caster, such as Blue Mage before level 41, I'm slamming drinks 24/7 anyway. If I have enough drinks that if I were to use them back to back to back, I have an hour of uptime on melon juice. I have enough drinks that I can party for 1 hour. I will stop, I will leave, I will make more drinks, I will not continue to party below 41. So, and I encourage you to do the same. I encourage you to level cooking and do that. It's depending on the job. I mean, if you're playing Red Mage, then like, just don't party below 41 once you hit that level 5 head. Anyway, but back to the topic, accuracy food and attack food. Now, first thing we need to talk about is your hit rate. So if I look at my, this is we're coming back to deeps now. This is really important. This is where we're bringing it. We're tying this back in. Deeps, Fury and Storm Rage, attack. Okay, so I didn't actually miss it all. If you are if you are accuracy capped, that means that you have a 95% hit rate. You can always miss, unless you are currently sneak attacking, and I think trick attacking also ensures that you won't miss. But, generally speaking, on almost everything in the game, including multi-hit weapon skills, if you're sneak attacking, the later hits, not the first hit, you will have a 5% chance to miss, even if you're at the absolute cap of your accuracy. Now, what does being at cap mean? So, you have if you're the same level as the enemy mob, if you have the exact same accuracy as they have evasion, you have a 75% hit rate. Every 2 accuracy over or under that mark changes your hit rate by 1%. So if I have 6 more accuracy than the mob has evasion, and we're the same level, I have a 78% hit rate. 6 divided by 2 is 3% hit rate, add to 75, 78%. In higher level parties, you really want to be at the AC cap as much as possible, or extremely close to it. And by extremely close to it, I mean 90% plus, because if you have a weapon skill like Pentathrust, that is actually going over that AC cap 5 times. Now, if you're playing like Samurai with a Hagen, or just a GK, and you're using Gecko, Gecko is a 1-hit. The first hit of every weapon skill gets plus 100 accuracy or a 50% additional bonus hit rate added to it. So that's pretty much always going to connect. If that doesn't, which you'll see it doesn't, it feels like that weapon skill misses more than Penta or the others, because it's only 1 hit. That has to be 5% for you to get the miss error message. Whereas if you're at capped and you Pentathrust, that means for you to do literally no damage, you have to get a 5% and then a 5% and then a 5% and then a 5%, or do it onto something that's perfect dodging, I guess. So, why am I talking about all this? At the higher levels, it's really important to be close to AC capped. And one of the reasons that this is important is if I look at this food, so like let's look at Soul Sushi, for example. That is plus 15% accuracy up to a maximum of 72. Now that 72 is the max it will give you, not 15% of you having 72 AC. Let's do a /check param, or AC set TP, AC disable, check param me. I have 378 accuracy. Let's just do, I'm going to do 378 plus 15%. It'll actually be a bit higher than that because Dex gives you AC. But with Soul Sushi on, I'm at least 435 AC. So 435 minus 378. Oh. 435 minus 378. We are at, that is a 57 accuracy delta. We can, again, we've got Dex, so we can round up and say 58. So that is a 29% increase in your hit rate. So that means if you have a 70% hit rate, you are missing almost a third of the time, more than a fourth of the time, and you pop that food, you now have 5 more strength, and you are hitting 95% of the time. That adds up very quickly. Also remember, even if you're just laser focused on weapon skills for some reason, you are weapon skilling more if you are able to generate more TP, and you are generating a lot less TP when you're missing a third of the time. Now, Furion, why are you explaining this? Why wouldn't you just say just use AC food, 5-head? For a few reasons. One, if you can cap or get extremely close to AC capping without AC food, then you can use attack food. Now, on a job like Blue Mage, my spells aren't governed by attack. They're governed by my attributes, like my strength, dex, vit, basically all the attributes. My auto attack's governed by attack. My weapon skills still have attack as a factor. But the reason that you think about this is because at lower levels, and the reason I just did this math example is, at 378, I am gaining about a 30%, I'm getting about a 30% buff to my hit rate by using AC food. If I were like level 10 in the dunes, my accuracy is like 50. And if we do 50 plus 15%, that's 50 plus 7.5. That's 57.5. That's 7.5 delta. All right, let's round up to 8, then divide by 2. That's a 4% increase to my hit rate. That's not that great. That is not good. That's not really going to have a practical effect. So, instead, you can use something like this at the lower levels. Until, to me, usually the 30s. It really depends, but usually by the 30s I'm swapping over to Soul Sushi, but again, it depends. Rice dumplings. 20% attack, cap of 45, or 30% ranged attack, cap of 45, with a base of 5 accuracy, so you get 2.5% AC. Or 2.5% hit rate, sorry. So if I use this rice dumpling in that same situation, I am missing 5 dex, which is still going to give me a couple points of AC. So we'll just round. We'll say like I don't know. I'll even be generous. I'm going to overestimate, say 12. So we get 12 AC. So I only miss 7 AC, even in that overly generous example. I'm only missing 7 accuracy and 2 strength, and in addition, I'm getting 20% to my attack. And the breakpoint for that attack is, I believe, 225. So, yeah. It's 225 for that attack. So, and by the breakpoint, I mean, once you hit 225 with rice dumplings, if your attack is that high, switch to coral subs. But the point being is that at lower levels, it doesn't make sense to use accuracy food. This is why jack-o'-lanterns are a trap. The hit rate does not really matter in the dunes. Like, it does, but, like, just put a hunter's roll on it and call it a day, and stack attack. Because accuracy is a skill that grows exponentially in terms of what it gives you, hit rate, the more of it that you have. Whereas, it kind of like haste, but less so. Whereas attack scales much more linearly, just attack good when you can't, you essentially can't get hit rate from accuracy food in the dunes or in the low levels of Quiffin or Utunga. So just use attack, because it's going to scale fairly linearly. There's also a guide to food by Falzam and Falaris that is linked in the companion to this video. And it mostly goes over exactly what I just said. Now, the reason I'm bringing all this up is that if I see someone has a 30% miss rate, or myself, I know that I need to be using accuracy food if I'm, I don't know, level 30, 40-ish or beyond, because I have enough AC built up just innately that the percent base bonus will give me a much higher hit rate. It also means that if I'm in a bird party, if I'm looking at this and I see, like, I'm a Sam and I'm, you know, what we'll say, I'm doing the most damage, and then there's someone that's here, or I'm doing the second most, I'm right here, you know, like slightly below, and there's another person that's like right here, and then there's another person that's like here. Or let's say we have, you know, you've got what I call a standard meta comp, which is Red Mage, Bard, Core, and then 3 things that hit birds well. If we've got 2 people that are like neck and neck for damage, and then 1 person's down here, I'm going to click on them, and I'm going to go, what's going on? Are their pentas too small? Maybe, but that usually is indicative of bad accuracy. Are their auto attacks too small? Maybe, but that's pretty damn rare. What it usually is hit rate. Hit rate is usually the thing. Like, the optimal way to play in that 54 to 60 sync is to cap your accuracy through the use of a huge amount of gil and gear, and then use attack food with Hunter's Roll to cover your to additionally pad your accuracy, basically to hit that cap. And then everything else focuses on attack, including the food. That's optimal. But you won't get dropped off a cliff by using accuracy food and having a few pieces of attack gear to be on the cheap side. Like, you might be doing 10 or 20% less damage than someone that's doing what I just described, but you're going to be close. You're going to be in the neighborhood. You're not going to be doing half as much damage. So if someone's doing half as much damage, it's usually a hit rate issue. We're going to come back to this when we talk about buffs to go over Hunter's Roll. Skillchains. The Skillchains add-on trivializes this process. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Low Windburst and give myself double march. Actually, no, I don't need to do that, because I am a Blue Mage. So whenever you use a weapon skill or a Chain Affinity Blue Mage spell, it will show you what you can chain with. So let's attack this. I'm going to use Chain Affinity, and I'm going to use, let's say, Cannonball. Cool, that went off. So if you see up here, it turned red, now it turns green. If I use Savage Blade right now, it will create a level 3 light skill chain. You can hold shift to click and drag to move that around your screen wherever it is most convenient for you. But I strongly encourage you to run this add-on. Now, this add-on is a port from Windower, so it's a little bit buggy. So the best way to deal with it is to run it, but whenever you're about to start partying, type /addon reload Skillchains. And it's reloaded, it's refreshed. It can bug out a little bit when you change weapons or zone with a weird weapon on it. Another thing is, mine is loaded by default. It's in my default.txt file. If yours is not loaded, add-on load Skillchains. And if it's not working for some reason, try add-on reload Skillchains. Now, that makes it really easy to skillchain. So when should you not skillchain? Sometimes at lower levels, but basically the biggest thing is if the weapon skill that is the damage that the skill chain does is based on the damage of the weapon skill that closes the skill chain. So if you're opening for someone, if you're using a weapon skill, or someone else in your, let's say someone else in your party uses a weapon skill and you've got a sword in the Valkyrie Dunes and you can use Red Lotus Blade to close that skill chain, or you've got like a fast blade to just, you're not going to skill chain, but you're going to dump TP. A lot of times that fast blade's actually going to be better. And the reason being is because, like, let's say I'm an Elvan and I'm a, like, warrior. Well, I have dog shit int. Int is a factor in that. And fast blade is a very, basically a purely physical weapon skill. The fast blade itself is going to do so much more damage that the combined amount from the Red Lotus and the bonus skill chain damage might not match up to that fast blade. These are serious things you should consider. Work smarter, not harder. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to skill chain. Now, that being said, if you're in Zeta and you are a thief and there is a dragoon there, and the dragoon uses double thrust, or a warrior uses double thrust, and the thief closes that with a Sata Viper Bite, yes, that is going to Michael Bay all over your screen. That is going to pretty much instantly kill an incredibly tough mob. It is essentially, if everything were lined up correctly, the mob's just dead. Like, that's so much damage in the low to mid 30s, the mob's just dead. So be conscious of when to skill chain. Generally speaking, the only time I think it's worth it to sacrifice a significant amount of weapon damage in order to use a worse weapon skill is if you're fighting something and the weapon skill that you're opening for someone, and the weapons, and you're coordinating with them, and the weapon skill that they're going to close you with is like a slug shot or just something absurdly large in terms of damage, because then the additional skill chain damage is just massive. Now, that being said, this also requires coordination and communication. It feels weird to do something like that, try to open for someone without talking to them first, and then you just wasted TP because your weapon skill that opens for them is just way worse than what you would normally use. Generally speaking, you want to be using... Generally speaking, I would say, when it comes to skill chains, think about them in terms of they're great to have, but they don't, unless you're playing Samurai with a GK, they don't really alter what weapon skill you're going to be using for most of the game. And I'm mostly talking about, the leveling process here. I'm not talking about necessarily at 75, but like even 54 to 60, well, especially 54 to 60, if I have a polearm, I am using pentathrust. If I am not using pentathrust, I am making a mistake. Now, granted, pentathrust does skill chain with slugshot and sidewinder, but in general, you want to be using the same, especially during the whole leveling process, you want to be using whatever your best, highest damage weapon skill is. And if you're running that on, maybe you notice that it skill chains with someone, or maybe they notice they skill chain with you, and then, work from there. But generally speaking, I don't see a situation in which it would make sense for me to use a weapon skill that isn't pentathrust if I'm using a polearm in a level 54 to 60 bird party. All right, now we're going to talk about buffs and debuffs and 8 weaknesses. Piercing, blunt, and slashing. So basically, just to give you some examples, so piercing weapons. A bow or a gun is piercing. Daggers are piercing. Polearms are piercing. Any pokey sword, so like rapiers, like I think Joyous should be piercing on its autos, by the way. If it fast blade, the weapon skills used with the Joyous are still slashing. But basically, polearms, guns, bows, daggers. There might be another type I'm forgetting, but those all do piercing damage. Slashing, that's your swords, that's your great axes, that's your great katanas, that's your great swords. Slashing isn't too relevant because you basically just want to be aware if something is really resistant to slashing. The only thing that I know of that's weak to slashing are the doomed. So like the doomed pilgrims, the rotting flesh, like giant fleshy enemies. If you're a blue mage, the things that you learn stinking gas off of, they're weak to it. But I don't know of anything else that is. Piercing is important because Calibri are weak to piercing. There are more things weak to piercing than any other type of damage in the game, as far as I know, and they usually have pretty strong weaknesses. So, like, any amount of damage that's done by a piercing weapon or that is piercing type against this Calibri gets a flat plus 25% bonus to the damage it deals. This is why a Dark Knight is a relatively weak DPS or DD in a 54 to 60 bird party. Blunt, the third and redheaded stepchild of the damage families. I don't know, actually. I should take that back. There's a lot more stuff resistant to blunt than slashing in my just off the top of my head, but there is also a handful of things that are actually weak to blunt. So skeletons are weak to blunt. The giant pots are weak to blunt. Another thing that I really that I kind of just briefly go over is there's two types of blunt damage: hand-to-hand and impact. What is impact? A club, a staff, cannonball, I think is impact. Bludgeon, the spell, is impact. And then there's hand-to-hand, which are hand-to-hand. And for some reason, Hysteric Barrage is hand-to-hand damage. Hand-to-hand damage is worse, just outright, in terms of weaknesses. So, like, a skeleton takes 12.5% more damage from fists, but it takes 25% more damage from impact. So, your bludgeon, your club, your staff, your frenetic grip, whatever. Tomahawk and Banish. So, you get, for whatever something is weak to, you have a 20%, or whatever something is resistant to. So, like, skeletons, I think, have they have a 50%, they do. They have a 50% resistance to piercing. So, if I use Banish on that, Banish and Tomahawk both remove 25% of that resistance in different ways. So, if I banish a skeleton, that 50% weakness is flat dropped to 25%. It gets a debuff from using Banish on that skeleton. I think it's just Banish and just all the things that begin with the word Banish. All the spells begin with Banish. Tomahawk's a little bit, and Banish only works on undead. Tomahawk works on anything. It's a warrior level 75 ability, but it removes 25% of the resist, not 25%. So that means if you have 50% resist to piercing damage on that skeleton, it's not going to go to 25% when you Tomahawk. It's going to go to 37.5%. Super weird. I don't know why. Dia, we've already talked about Dia. It is 5, 10, and 15% reduction on enemy defense and a very mild dot. Berserk. Berserk is a flat plus 25% multiplicatively stacking buff to your damage or your attack. So it's especially, like, you consider like a coral sub or rice dumpling attack food, plus 2 minuets, plus chaos roll, plus berserk. That berserk is taking all of your attack, all the attack given to you by food, all the attack given to you by the 2 minuets, all the attack given to you by the chaos, and then just adding 25% to that already massive number. Again, this is how you start to see insanely efficient parties doing upwards of 50,000 EXP an hour in the level 54 to 60 range, and even without rangers, you can still pull without a ring charge like 30k plus an hour with just melees, with samurais, dragoons, whatever. Usually samurais, though. Dragoon does slightly more damage, but it's made of paper and feels really grimy to play. Minuet and Chaos Roll, we just kind of touched on that. They're both really, really strong. Let's go Chaos Roll, FFXI Classic, just so that I don't misspeak. Chaos Roll is percentage-based, so let's say you get a lucky Chaos Roll without a Dark Knight, that's a flat plus 25%. So, and it's, let's say you have 100 attack, and you get a Chaos Roll, you're now 125. If you Berserk on top of that, you're not at 150. You're at 25% of 125, and my brain is slow right now, so plus 25%. You're at 156. So it stacks multiplicatively. March and March is flat. It's just a straight up this much attack. Sorry, not March. Minuet. Minuet is straight up attack. Now, they're both good, and usually you want both. Now for this next part's a little more important. So Madrigal versus Hunter's Roll. Hunter's Roll is roughly 20 AC, up to 40, even without a Ranger. If you have a Lucky Roll with a Ranger, you can get 55 AC off of it. That is a 27.5% increase to your hit rate. That is Soul Sushi. That's insane. That's high-level Soul Sushi. That's using Soul at 75 in my... I think that was TP set we did, and my TP set is probably too much AC. That's a massive amount of accuracy and a massive buff to your hit rate. Madrigal. So let's. By the way, that's Hunters from when you unlock it at super low levels, like Dunes levels, all the way through the game. Madrigal. It is 10 accuracy or less in Valkyrum, or Valkyrum. It's like nothing. It's a 5% hit rate buff. Just use Minuet. Madrigal is like... There are very, very few circumstances that Madrigal is ever good. If I go to like a 33 to 40 sync party, like in Zeta or rarely Altep, I don't really like Altep, but let's say I'm in that range, and I show up and I see someone with a really bad hit rate, even before I get there, I'm usually going to be proactive and say, no one in this party use any food before I get there, and I'm just going to hand everybody in the party like 3 pieces of Soul Sushi, or crab sushi or bream sushi, something to boost that AC, and I'm just going to tell the Bard, double Minuet, and the Corsair Hunter plus Chaos. Which is why people always really want a Bard and a Corsair, because these buffs stack massively together. They fundamentally change the way that the party plays, and, like, you really want the core because you want the attack. You want the MP on your healer. Your healer's really going to want that ballad. But you really need a puller, and the Bard is the best puller in the game for EXP parties. So that's why people really want a Bard. Corsair, you want because you take what is essentially an upgrade of the Valkyrum Dunes experience, where everyone just has like a 70 or 75% hit rate if you're lucky, and takes that into a, well, now we actually have really good hit rates because we have this just massive Hunter's Roll that just is free. It's just there if you have the Corsair. Also, Corsair is a fairly impressive damage dealer before level 4, like in the 30 to 40 range. If it's RA. Haste. The most important thing about haste to know is that it's a... If I have 70 haste, so like let's say I've got... let's say I have 66 haste. So I am not... You might think I'm attacking 66% faster, which would be, I'm over halfway to attacking twice as fast. But what haste is it's a reduction on your cooldowns and your auto attack delay. That means that at 66%, or we'll say 66.6% haste, I am now at a 33.3% or 0.4% of my original delay. I am not attacking almost twice as fast. I'm attacking 3 times faster. Haste is the most powerful stat in the game as you approach the cap on it, which I believe is about 33%. Actually, hold on, I've actually got it in the doc here. Haste from equipment caps at 25%. Haste gains from buffs, from spells, caps at 43.75. Hasso and Desperate Blows are separate. Hasso gives you 10 haste. For a maximum of 93.3% haste. Now, this is probably going to involve a G-Horn and a Soul Voice, but this is possible. And you have a cap of minus 50% to spell CDs. The last thing, I guess, in terms of technical info, is spell cooldowns are floored. So if I have Headbutt is a 10-second cooldown. I want a 5-second cooldown on it. That means I need 41% haste. So let's say, 10 seconds minus 41% is going to put me at 5.9 seconds. Any haste beyond that is a waste, because it's going to floor that decimal down to 0. Now, please correct me, send me DMs if this is wrong, but that's how I've always seen it explained on Eden. I'm pretty sure that's the way it's on retail and Eden, but it floors down to the 0. So if I have 41% on a 10-second cooldown, it's not a 5.9 second cooldown. It is now a 5.0 second cooldown. Another thing to quickly touch back on the recast plugin, it's always going to show you 1 second less than you actually have on cooldown. Generally, it's just part of the jank built into it. Fast cast is essentially half strength haste. It requires you to precast, and it can't be used in macros really, unless you're giving up on mid-cast stuff. And you might be able to use it in macros if you're a black mage, but on a blue mage you can't use that. So let me give you an example. We've got the AC enabled. Loquacious Earring enhances fast cast effect. I believe this is 2%. I'm going to double check. Loquacious Earring. I just want to double check. I don't want to say 2%. So what this does is it reduces the cast time of my spells by 2%, but it also reduces the recast time of them by half of that. So in this case, 1%. So it's effectively giving me 1% haste, gear haste. I believe that would count as gear haste. Ashitacast and gear. It's hard. It's one of those things where with fast cast, you're not thinking about like capping all of the various sources, because if you're, at least I don't as a blue mage, because once I'm hasted and double marched, I'm basically at the like proper hasted, not refueling. It's close with refueling, but with haste and double march, I'm basically just at the haste cap for spell recast, because it's only 50%. With some exceptions. Now, we are how far into this video? I've been recording for 41 minutes. Let's we add a minute to that for the intro. We're at 42 minutes. And now I'm going to talk about the most important thing in this video. Ashitacast and Gearswap. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say I have the W Turban. The W Turban gives me 5% haste. The Homam hat gives me 4 AC, 4 magic AC, and 3 haste. But let's pretend I'm just a thief or something. I only care about the AC. So I've got 4 AC and 3 haste. The optical hat gives me 10 accuracy. So you might look at the optical hat and think that is a compromise between the 5%, or sorry, you might look at the Homam hat and think that it is a compromise between the 5% haste W hat and the 10 AC optical hat. You might look at that and think, if I'm going to be picking between these three, this is what I should be picking. I don't know why I still have the Homam hat. If you have this hat and this hat, then the only thing that the Homam has is HP, MP, Magic AC, and defense, which, generally speaking, you are not concerned about. The defense value, the defense variable, we're playing the game where Utsusemi was figured out over 20 years ago. This item only exists for the Magic AC. That's not, and when I say I don't know why I keep it, because I have the Relic Hat, which is essentially 5. It's 5 Magic AC with other stuff on it too, as a blue. So this item is a trap. Never look at a piece of gear in this game and think, if I equip this piece, it might be better in some ways, but I'm losing this much. So never look at the haste hat and think, do I want to attack 5% faster, or do I want 10 more accuracy on my weapon skills? You should look at every piece of gear in this game and think, if you think to yourself, that would be really, really good for this one thing I do, but not good for anything else, that is now still that's a valuable piece of gear to you. You haven't seen me wearing, I mean, I'm gear locked right now, so you wouldn't see it anyway, but you haven't seen me wear these boots the entire time. I've just been wearing the Homam that I idle in. These are insane boots. Now, the Homam have 3 haste. I just talked about how powerful haste is. I'm always going to want to auto-attack in Homam. But these have 5 AC, 3 magic accuracy, and 3 strength. These are the best boots in the game that I know of for casting Disseverment. Actually, I don't know the stats of Morgans. Morgans could be better. I don't think they are, though. These boots I would never want to auto-attack in. But they're an incredible piece for Disseverment, and honestly, they're not a terrible weapon skill piece. They're not bad. So the point I'm trying to make is, if I have the Homam hat, the W hat, and the optical hat, there's not really a place in time where I'm ever going to use the Homam head. I am going to look at the W hat and go, 5 haste, that's insane, that's awesome, that's the best auto-attacking piece in the game, pretty much. Optical hat. I am playing a job like, let's say for some reason I'm playing Paladin with a polearm, and I have a multi-hit weapon skill, and Paladin's got like an E in polearm or something. That 10 accuracy is beyond important for me. And honestly, to Samurai do some, if your gear is questionable or you don't have any merits on Samurai and using a polearm at 75 against something that's around your level, that optical hat is still like something you're looking at. This hat is essentially a trap. This hat doesn't really give you anything unless you need the 4 magic act for something. The haste is useless because the W head exists, and the accuracy is essentially useless because the optical hat exists. The only situation that you would ever care about this, without worried about the magic act, is if for some reason you really thought it was worth it to give up 2 haste, and you were going to basically hit the act cap at that 4 accuracy. But the 2 haste is such a big deal because haste grows the more of it that you have, that there's no real reason why you should make that trade-off. It's sort of like the I think it's Ace's Helm? Ace's Helm, FFXI. Yeah, so Ace's Helm drops from King Vingaroon. Yes, it's 4 strength, 7 ac, -7 evasion, but who cares, and 4 haste. Dark Samurai Dragoon specific. What is that piece for? It's for auto-attacking if you desperately need 7 ac. 7 ac is enough that it can make a difference, and you're missing, and you're willing to sacrifice a point of haste. That being said, haste becomes so powerful the more of it that you have, and Samurai especially, and Dark and Dragoon can wear the Homam, so they have haste too, but Samurai gets like, the Byakko legs, the innate Hasso. You get so much haste that you're already at a point where 1% haste is like, oh my god, that's a shitload. Because if you think about it, when you're at, like, we'll say like 65% haste, that 1% haste is several times more what 1% haste is worth to you when you're at 0 haste. So, how to look at gear at a macro level. We're going to talk about the elemental stabs a little bit. So I have all the HQ elemental stabs. The NQ are worth getting. If you're a caster, like, let's say Neptune, that's a bad example because nobody's going to use a Neptune's. Let's say Apollo's staff. Cure potency plus 10%, yes. But any light aspected nukes, such as Banish, or debuffs, such as Lullaby, are going to have plus, for the NQ, plus 10 magic attack and plus 20 magic accuracy. For the HQ, 15 magic attack, 30 magic accuracy. Ashitacast will automatically swap these in for you. Another good example, probably the most important example, is Bard. Probably the most important example. So, if you're a Bard, you should probably be pulling with Pebbles. Pebbles pull faster, and they don't animation lock you in the way that pulling with a song does. However, if you're pulling with Pebbles, that means you need to equip an instrument after every pull to sleep them on, potentially, and to buff everybody, because you want the Minuet buff. If you're high enough level, that if you're at 75, you want the March buff. I don't know. Don't judge me. I don't know why I have Madrigal Horn there. But the point being is, you also just need to have an instrument equipped if you want to have 2 songs in the party. So, by using Ashitacast, you can make it such that you will automatically equip the appropriate staff. So the Bard, it only has 2 elemental stabs. It has 2 HKLML stabs. It has Terra stabs and Apollo stabs. Why does it have these 2 stabs? So Apollo's, well, again, we've gone over 10% healing, but it's 30 magic accuracy on Lullaby. It makes it so Lullaby is way more likely to stick. It's also, like, I don't use this. Once I hit 51, I never equip the Monster Signa ever again. Because this staff also has plus 10% to the charm success rate built into it. Oh, sorry, this staff. Apollo's has plus 10% to charm. So even on Beastmaster, if I'm doing something sketchy, I'm never going to wear the Monster Signa once I'm 51. Terra staff. Earth. So why does that matter? So one, I'm idling in it because it has 20% less, or 20% physical damage reduction. But more importantly, slow is earth aspected. Elegy is a type of slow. That means that Elegy has 30 more magic accuracy when I have this HQ staff equipped compared to not having it equipped. This is huge. This is so powerful. And you can get 20 of that magic accuracy for getting the NQ version of these stabs, which are like between 9 and 12k. You absolutely want to get these stabs if you're using anything related. If you are a caster, the depths to which you will go into Ashitacast are far deeper, in my opinion, than if you are a melee. So, now we're going to talk about Ashitacast versus macros. Now, I kind of mentioned this before, but let's say... why does Ashitacast do things that are just fundamentally not doable with macros? So, let's use an example on the Blue Mage. I cast Disseverment earlier, or Cannonball, or whatever. I will pre-cast in these Homam legs, which have a 5. They have fast cast on them. I think it's 3%. Homam Cosiales? I believe it's a 3. Oh, no, it's a 5. It's a 5% fast cast. Okay. So that's 5, and then I get 2 from the earring, so we're at 7% faster cast time. So my spells cast 7% faster for free, because when the game snapshots what gear you have to calculate the damage of, like, a blue magic spell, or, well, anything, it happens at it's the last thing that happens. So you can pre-cast by equipping the fast cast gear, then swap to the gear that you actually want to snapshot the damage in, then swap back into what you're either idling or auto-attacking in as a blue. All of the spells I really care about, well, all the fun spells, are a half-second base cast time, which I just reduced by 7%. Oh, but Furion, you reduced the cast time by 7%, but it's only half a second to begin with. Why do you care? Well, if I put this into my precast into Ashitacast, it will do it for every spell, including Utsusemi, which you would like that to be cast very quickly. And 2, remember, half of that 7%, so 3.5%, is actually going to be applied essentially as haste or cooldown reduction to the cooldown of whatever I'm casting. So basically, if I'm auto-attacking, I'm in my TP gear as a blue mage. If I cast Disseverment, it's going to swap me into my pre-cast gear and cast the spell. Then it is going to swap me, and start casting the spell. Then it is going to swap me into my Disseverment set that I have set for it in Ashitacast, which is, as you saw earlier, radically different from my auto-attack gear and radically different from my idle gear. Then it's going to, as soon as that damage is snapshotted, it's going to swap me back into my TP gear. This is a relatively simple process to set up, and everything I just described takes place in well under half a second. Well, it would be 4.465 seconds, because it would be half a second minus 7%. So that's the reason why you can't hit the same ceiling without using something like Ashitacast, because this is working on a RAM injection level. Like, basically, it's happening in your client in a way such that lag will never affect this. Whereas macros, if you've used Gearswap macros, you know that lag does matter a lot. Sorry, we've been going for a while now. So next, we're going to go to... we're going to talk about, we're going to use some simple examples here. We're gonna use some simple examples, and we're gonna use some really complicated examples. So I've talked about the precasting. I've talked about the blue example. I've talked about the pebble pulling. So basically, the way it would work is if I'm pulling on Bard, if I RA or tell the game to RA, again, it's going to basically do this. I mean, it does this in a fraction of a second. If I tell the game, if I set this up properly and I tell it to RA, it's going to, even though you'll see it down here, you see I have an instrument, the pebble will blink in and it will RA. Now, this is the Equip Viewer add-on. I talked about this in the last video. It shows you what you have equipped. This is a window report, and because it is ported from Windower, there's a little bit of a delay, which is why it might appear like it's not working at times, but it's a good tool to have, but sometimes you'll load in and you'll see like, missing 2 slots here, and then hit Control-E, oh, they're all here. So if I were to pull on Bard, all I would have to do is I would make macros to cast my lullaby, assuming that the party was fast enough to do that, which it should be. I would have a macro to ranged attack with a pebble, and I would have macros for all of my songs. And I would run around, pulling with pebbles, sleeping the birds. Once I catch a second bird, sleep that if the party's not grabbing it just yet, or really sleep it anyway because it will save you Tsusemi shadows. I've got a macro for Tsusemi, and I'm using the buff songs, and I'm using buff songs. I'm really only debuffing to sleep in most EXP parties, unless the party's really slow for some reason. But honestly, Battlefield Elegy, the lower level Elegy, it's not that powerful. Carnage Elegy is a 48%, 50% slow, so Carnage Elegy is busted. But Battlefield Elegy is not quite as powerful. It can be good, but usually it's kind of weird because by the time you have the good slow, the party is usually killing the thing so quickly you don't care about debuffing it for defensive purposes. But the point is, I'm basically playing a game like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14 at that point, because all I'm thinking about are, I need to sleep, I need to pull mob, I need to sleep mob, I need to cast 1 buff on party, pull other mob, sleep other mob, cast next buff, pull other, sleep other, and then third song with like a ballad or something, and then keep pulling. So keep up my 3 songs while pulling. And every time I cast a lullaby, I'm using Mary's horn or Nursemaid's harp if I have them. I'm using a cornet +1, which if you're a bard player, you should have. And every time I pull, magically there is a pebble in my hand. And as soon as the pebble is out of my hand, magically there is an instrument in my hand. This is really, really important. Like, massively important. And if you're not doing that, like, your party's going to find out your party's going to notice, because first of all, if Minuet the Minuet horn is level 4, which means you have it by the time you get to the dunes, and that +2 increases the potency of it, but it also increases the duration. And it's really obvious if your Minuets aren't buffed by that +2, because you will see as soon as they snapshot that the timer is lower than it should be. Like, just having the status, let me bring this up here. Like, where the number is here, it's going to immediately drop below 2 minutes, and that's going to alert someone that's paying attention that you had an instrument equipped to give me the double minuet, but it wasn't a minuet instrument. So basically, it amounts to a massive amount of quality of life for a job like Bard. For a job like Blue, or any melee damage dealer, it's basically like required for you to do well. Gearswap can do all of this, but it's written in Lua, and I'm more familiar with XML. Gearswap is technically more powerful, like I said earlier. So we're going to now go over a couple examples. We're going to start with mine. So this is an example I wrote up just for y'all. Let me look and make sure I'm not forgetting anything to touch on before we get into these. This should be pretty brief, actually. Ooh, camera. I'm just going to get rid of my face for a second. All right, so this example, if you're in Stormrage_Drig, space 54, this example it's an Ashitacast file that I sort of wrote up as an example to imagine that you are a Dragoon in a level 54 to 60 bird party. You might notice that there's only 3 pieces of gear in my idle set. There's only 3 pieces of gear in my TP set. There's a piece of gear for jump and a piece of gear for pentathrust. if you don't tell Ashitacast to change something, it doesn't. So, idle, Drakenmail. Again, I've annotated this. I'm going to upload this along with this monster as examples of a very simple Ashitacast and a very complex Ashitacast. I'd like to give a special thank you to Wiwiana, or Liliana, the red mage player on Eden, a good friend of mine who agreed to annotate her monstrous XML file. Now, granted, I too have a monstrous XML file, but it is just for my blue mage. My blue mage file is much longer than my other melees. So, again, this is just only... You can write it such that Ashitacast will level sync you down, and you can make one profile that will work at all levels. My Samurai, again, shout out to Liliana, my Samurai works like that. This works in such a way in which I will equip from level 53 on, I will run this Ashitacast, and it will just work. It will just Todd Howard. It just works forever. My Dragoon, this is an old file, but again, we'll talk about it. So, idle, Drakenmail. Why do I want the Drakenmail equipped when I idle? Because the Drakenmail gives regen to my pet dragon, my pet wyvern. So the Scorpion Harness doesn't do anything except give me like accuracy when I'm idle. So we'll put on the Drakenmail to give regen to the pet. Idle, Swift Belt. It doesn't really need to be equipped. I could honestly just have this as Draken. TP, Leaping Boots, Swift Belt. Actually, no, I would want to have the... I think I would... No, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I could have these not here. It's fine. But just to be on the safe side, I plugged them in. TP, so this is the auto attack set. I called it... You can name it whatever you want, because status engage down here is what the trigger is for equip if I'm auto attacking or TPing. Equip set TP, only because I named it TP up here. Again, I tried to annotate it fairly simply. So when I'm auto attacking, I swap on the Scorpion Harness and get rid of the Drakenmail. I make sure I'm not swapping off because I'm moving from idle, but I make sure that I have the Swift Belt on. I make sure that I have the Leaping Boots on. Now, when I jump, the reason why do I care about the Leaping Boots? Because I swapped them in another place. So this line right here just says equip the idle set when idle. It will equip these three pieces when I'm idle. Now, if I want to, I can have a piece of gear for every slot. In fact, I usually do, except most of the time I equip my weapon manually. Very rarely. I only have a trigger to swap my weapon from a 53 Thundercloud to a Battle Fork in the bird parties on my Samurai, just so that I don't forget. Because again, I'm gear locked. I want to make sure that this actually happens. But generally speaking, I don't have a trigger, and that trigger actually, I believe, expires once I hit level 60 in my Ashitacast. But generally speaking, I don't have the weapons written in for most of the melees, and the reason being is if I have the weapon written in, it increases the probability of there being some sort of issue. It's not really necessary because you shouldn't be swapping the weapon anyway, naturally, and if you do, you want that to be a forced decision because swapping your weapon resets your TP. You can, however, write them. So, like, if I go over to Furious Stormmage Blue, this right here, Mysterious Light, Eyes on Me, if add name equals. So this is under my caster section on my Blue Mage AC. If add name, Mysterious Light, or Eyes on Me. These use Charisma and want Magic Accuracy, which is the shorthand for my set that gives Charisma and Magic Accuracy. If my TP is less than 350, it will automatically swap in. What does it swap in? Add Element Staff, Add Element Grip. Using these, it will automatically detect... It will sub in Add Element for whatever you've got there. So like whatever element of the spell is. So Eyes on Me, it will swap in the Pluto's Staff. It will then swap in the Dark Grip. It is dope. This is sweet. This saves you so much time. Now, we're gonna get a little technical for a moment. Blast Bomb, equip set. This is the set for Blast Bomb that share with a lot of things. Used to actually be up here. Up here, where it automatically would equip the correct staff and grip. Why did I do this manually? Because Blast Bomb deals fire-based damage. and is a fire aspected spell. So the game wants to equip Vulcan Staff. What's the problem? It has additional effect bind, and the magic accuracy of the bind is governed by ice, because ice is bind. So get wrecked. It's yeah. So anyway, we're gonna go back over to here. We're gonna get the last few details. So the jump, Drakengreaves. Let me double check really quickly what the Drakengreaves do. It's been a minute. Actually, no. We can just jump over. We can jump over here. We can go. We can look at the Drakengreaves. Enhances jump effects. I'm pretty sure it's just additional damage. Gotta love tooltips from 2002. Oh my god! I googled Drakengreaves and now we're looking at Final Fantasy XIV stuff. Holy shit! Oh my god! Yeah, it's okay. It's a 10% just flat 10% bonus damage to your jumps. So pretty good stuff. And the reason that I have leaping boots in both the idle and TP spots is because I want to make sure that if I am not using the job ability jump, I am not wearing those boots. Now, yes, this does just straight up, again, on a level that is too fast for me to even describe, put the boots in the slot when you use jump, even though you just told it. Basically, you're telling this program to make sure you're wearing those boots when you use jump, even though the program Ashitacast is not using jump. You are using jump just via a macro, and it will automatically swap that in. Lastly, this is the single most important thing if you are if you've gotten far enough into COP to get a Swift Belt. The Life Belt and the Swift Belt, in my opinion, are the best belts in the game for 54 to 60. They are, well, we'll say just level, 48 to 60. They are the most iconic belts, and to some extent, there's a good argument that they're both very useful. Actually, it's not an argument. They are both very useful situationally at 75. They are fantastic pieces. So, Pentathrust. I went over earlier. Pentathrust is a 5-hit. So that means if I have a 90% hit rate, I have 10% chances to miss a hit. If I am capped, I have 5% chances to miss a hit. You really want to be at the cap for Pentathrust. Another thing is, haste doesn't benefit you at all when you use a weapon skill. It just doesn't. It's just the speed at which you do stuff. So what you're going to do is, what I do is swap in the life belt when I use a weapon skill. Now, the Swift Belt also has a -5 attack on it, and it's got -5 attack. Swift Belt. I'm pretty sure I know what's... Yeah, it's -5 attack, 3 AC, and 4 haste. The Life Belt is 10 AC and nothing else. But that means it is effectively 5 more attack because there's a 5 attack penalty on the Swift Belt. So by swapping in the Life Belt when I Pentathrust, I am gaining 5 attack and 7 accuracy, and assuming that I already own these items, this is literally free. This is just free. So, that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera back on. I'm sure I missed a lot of things. This was like trying to do a one-take here. We're a little bit over an hour in length. I'm going to quickly scan over the doc to see if there's anything that we're forgetting. I think I got it all. Feel free to DM me if you have any questions about this. I'm Furied Stormrage on Eden. I am Esports Monies on Discord. So there's I put some helpful links at the end of the video. There's a Classic Wiki macro page, a Classic Wiki text command guide, Dark Knight Guide by Falorus, Sam Guide by Falorus, War Guide by Falorus. These are, well, in addition to the one I mentioned earlier, the Food Guide, and and a link to the Classic Wiki's damage types page. So when I was giving the examples about damage types, Tomahawk and Banish, you can find all that there. This is all in the companion doc that will be with this video wherever it's put. So, I hope this answered a lot of questions. To be clear, with Ashitacast, it's not something that I go to the Valkyrie Dunes with. And honestly, like most of the time when I'm just running around the game, I don't have it running. Like if I'm fishing, I'm not using Ashitacast. I don't have it in my default. But if I'm doing any combat above level 50, I have that shit running. Always. Like, always. And the reason 50 is so... The reason like that 50-ish mark is so important is within 3 levels, the life belt, the swift belt, and all of the elemental stabs become equipable. So from that point on, it's no longer a slight difference in your performance. It is a massive... It's a very noticeable difference. You can gain in real ways. Another thing I want you to really take away from this guide is you can download our Ashitacast docs, the examples that we have that are annotated. They'll be uploaded and linked with this video. You can take and upload those, or you can download those and edit them and just customize them to your needs. The Liliana's is obviously very advanced. Mine's fairly simple, but the point being is if you have good or decent or okay gear, but you aren't super rich, you're going to perform better than someone that is wearing insanely good gear most of the time that doesn't know how to use it. If you're not gear swapping and you have really good gear, someone that is gear swapping can come in with way worse gear and do the same or more damage than you do. There's a lot more to what Ashitacast can do than what I just talked about here today, but I think this is a good overview of how it works, how to load it. You can type /, and I added this to the doc, the Google Doc, or no, the simple example. But if you type /AC add set new set, it will. If I press enter, it will create a new set of gear with everything I have equipped on in my Ashitacast. So like let's say, and I actually used this feature extensively because I ended up needing like 30 some sets for my Blue Mage, just because of all the different things spell scale off of. One thing I will mention though is if you do it that way, make sure that you don't have anything in your main and sub slots, unless you want to risk resetting your TP on the fly. Or just be aware that you did it that way. Anyway, we've been going for a little bit over an hour now. Thank you for watching. I hope that this video has been useful. I called it the Ashitacast guide, but we didn't start talking about Ashitacast until like 40 some minutes into the video. So thanks again for watching. Hit me up if you have any questions. There'll be the companion doc posted with this in the Eden Discord, along with, well, I mean, I'll be posting it, so you can just DM me from there if you see this. This video will probably be unlisted. It might end up being listed. I'm not sure. Anyway, thanks, y'all.